My name is Mike Moulding, and I know most of you, apart from this gentleman here. I know Albert, and I'm an activist in Swinton North Ward, and it's going to be my intentions to stand against Derek Antrobus in May 2012. And I've joined on behalf of the Community Action Party the Mayoral referendum yes team, because I passionately believe that an elected mayor is a better style of local government than the system that we have at present. To my left is Geoffrey Berg, and Geoffrey is the gentleman that took the trouble, along with other individuals, to collect the 10,000 signatures that are required, approximately 5% of the electorate, that are required to trigger a referendum in law. And Geoffrey and a few other people spent months going around the city of Salford collecting the relevant signatures. He's not affiliated to any political party, and he felt that change was required and took the trouble that he did over how many months, Geoffrey? 6 months to get the required signatures. To the right is Stephen Morris, a Swintonian, and the North West Region chairman of the English Democrat Party. Again, a political party who are in favour nationally for a system of local government which is managed through a directly elected mayor, and the English Democrats currently have an elected mayor in Doncaster. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to let Geoffrey speak for a few minutes as to how a directly elected mayor would affect Salford City Council financially in terms of council tax and income. So I'll pass you over to Geoffrey.
Thanks very much. As a lot of many of us here, and a lot that are close to the campaign, I'll concentrate on saying some of the things you may not know. Now, Salford Council have claimed it's going to cost 200,000. Originally it said 150,000 to hold this referendum. Well, the reality of the matter is that the extra cost is probably a third of that, because obviously they will have to have polling in office clerks at the polling stations. They'll have to send out the polling cards, but most of it, in my experience, will be made up of officer time, which they would otherwise spend largely twiddling their thumbs. At any time they have to work according to their job to count as officer time. And on the basis that it's too costly, they just end up abolishing all elections. You can say the general election would have cost us so many £1 million. Why have it? It could be spent on the National Health Service otherwise on that argument. So it's just an argument for their convenience. And to put matters in context, each and every year, Salford residents are being asked, indeed made, to spend, to pay £15 million in council tax, more than their neighbours in Trafford. So if it was taken down by about 15% in council tax bills to what neighbouring Trafford pays, that would save residents £15 million a year, which is hundreds of times more than the 150,000 claim cost, or probably the real cost of 50 or 70,000 pounds of this referendum. But you can ask, do Salford's Labour councillors really care about spending money? Not, I think, as long as they can grab all the money they can think of for themselves. And I must hand it to them. Salford's Labour councillors have become particularly good at that, even compared to other boroughs. Unlike elsewhere, the mayor in Salford is just a Labour Party perk. In every neighbouring council, they alternate, giving about 1 and 3 to the opposition. In Salford, it's nearly 20 years since they had an opposition councillor as mayor. It doesn't swap around, it's just a Labour Party perk. They minimise what they pay to the opposition. They don't even pay the token amount the deputy leaders of opposition groups get in other councils. But best of all, they've let for themselves, unlike every other council, and I have looked at the executives of names and indeed gone further in a lot of councils. And there's neighbouring Bury, there's Manchester, but unlike every other council, Salford Labour have invented the notion of executive support of councillors is to augment the 10 they are permitted, maximum they are permitted by law to pay as being a member of the executive. So practically each member of the executive gets a so-called executive support member, which is an excuse to pay some other Labour councillor, 8 of them in all, an extra £6,000 a year, plus on top of the 10,000 they get for being a councillor. I say no other council I know of has that system and that way of getting money into the back pockets of their own supporters. And then that's costing £50,000 a year each year, the same cost as the referendum. And as they're saving £40 million a year this year anyhow, are they doing any savings in councillor allowances now? Oh, I happen to live in Bury, or the borough of Bury, Prestwich actually, but Labour just took control this year in Bury. Now that the usual thing when a new party takes control is almost every member of that party gets an extra responsibility allowance into their pocket, and the previous ones lose theirs. But this new Labour councillor decided to reduce councillor allowances by stopping the extra money for travelling within the borough, which Salford are not contemplating doing, and to reduce the extra responsibility allowance by 10%, saving nearly £100,000 a year. Well, that sort of thing, and would only give Councillor Mary and his stooges his nightmares. They certainly show no intention of doing that. However, to get back to the reasons for changing to a directly elected mayor after Labour has 40 years, apart from having the Labour councillors being particularly well practised, better than other boroughs, are getting their snouts into the trough of your money, isn't there a better way of running Salford, which has a higher council tax than all 6 neighbouring councils, and where all the spare money, your money, goes to just a few areas, mainly in inner city or small parts of inner city Salford? Now, as an alliance, we agreed on a couple of policies a short time ago, and we all agreed on it. And everybody on this platform, from the Independent, English Democrats, Community Action Party, have agreed that if we get a mayor at the end of the process from one of our group, we will monitor council tax spending or the council spending throughout the whole borough and see what goes where. And we are committed to stop spending practically all the money on a few little areas, while most areas, including Swinton and Worsley and Little Houghton, get practically no money, and no money to maintain what's essential to those areas. Instead it goes in demolishing, which isn't very popular even in the city Salford, and rebuilding a few areas Mussolini style. I think Mary must take his model of Mussolini type regeneration, except what's being put up in Salford is even worse than what Mussolini put up in Birmingham. The second policy which we've agreed on is after the council tax freeze next year, if you elect us, and people will have a choice between continuing with the existing Labour regime, with a new, if they directly elect a mayor, going for a Conservative or other party or another independent. But if you go with us, as after next year, when there's a council tax freeze, is whether there's an elected mayor or not is going to be frozen, so it's not going to cost you any money, more money, or less money to have an elected mayor. In 2013, the first year the elected mayor sets the budget, we propose to halve, and you heard right, half Salford's council tax. Now, how can that be done? The first and the major item of that, which will cover most of the cost of that, is that we are committed to completely ending the net, that's the loss made on the regeneration spending within Salford. That whole budget is £34 million, I think. It's about 60 million that's spent, and there is over half of that in subsidy from the council taxpayer, which is over £300 for every household that pays council tax in Salford. And why? If you ask us this, I mean, we're having enough trouble with the traffic jams over the Crescent, which has been going on for ages. And if you ask, do you want to pay £300 each year in addition for that, we know what the answer would be. But Labour aren't interested in that, not Mussolini Melli anyhow. So we're going to end that budget and to take a comparison, traffic spends under 1 million each year on regeneration, and it's got areas in Stratford, traffic and Parkington, which are every bit as poor as in the city Salford. The second thing we're going to intend to do is to review all other areas of spending to produce a net 7% overall reduction, apart from the school's budget, which is protected, and apart from the council housing budget, which is funded by the council house rents. Now, just to show that it's possible, two starkest examples, apart from the schools and young persons, traffic, which is a similar size to us in population terms, 96% of the population spends 28 million net, Salford spends 61 million net. That is the difference, which amounts to about a third of the council tax if that was made into no difference. So we'll look at that. At a smaller budget, arts and leisure, it may be desirable, but not all of it is essential. Salford spends over 9 million a year, traffic 2.5 million a year. So what I'm saying is that there's a huge amount to gain by giving yourself the right to choose who will be elected mayor next January when they hold a referendum. You could end favouritism in council spending, favouritism that favours Swinton, the council leaders, Warden, Salford, and a few areas around there, and you could halve the council tax if you support us right through to the end of the process, probably in May next year, when there would then be a mayoral election along with the council elections. And on there, apart from complimenting Michael Mouldy, because I've been interested in politics for around 40 years, closely interested, and I've never known a candidate who, between elections, to put out so many leaflets and good leaflets as he has done.
Thank you, Geoffrey. So what Geoffrey has said is that if people vote yes for a directly elected mayor, I've looked at the evidence and listened to his arguments, and as an ex-elected member of another local authority, I can confirm and believe, because I will be campaigning on it, that it is possible to cut council tax from 2013 by half if you vote in favour of a directly elected mayor. And the reason why it can be done is because a mayoral candidate will come forward and confirm that in the event that that candidate is elected, council tax will be cut in half from the first time he sets a budget or she sets a budget from 2013. And the executive and Salford Council and the chief officers will be instructed to set a budget that ensures that that is the case. I'm now going to pass you over to Stephen Morris, who is the chairman of the English Democrats North West region.
Thank you. Just a bit of history really on the directly elected mayor. It's actually, the current system for a directly elected mayor was brought in by the Labour government. So the big question is why Salford Labour are so set against it. Currently we have 14 directly elected mayors in England. 4 of them are Labour, 3 Conservative, 2 Liberal Democrats. You then have 4 independents, and then we have the English Democrat one in Doncaster. So what you're left with is that people are choosing a candidate outside of the main 3 parties. It's breaking their stranglehold on council. They throw up some negativity, like say, well, the ones in Hartlepool, originally they say the ones in Hartlepool voted for a monkey. Right? Now the monkey was a mascot for Hartlepool Football Club. What they don't tell you is he's been re-elected 3 times, so he's not doing a bad job. Right? You could have argued the first one was a one-off, a stunt, but when somebody's re-elected 3 times, then it's no longer a stunt, they're doing the job right. You then hear some negativity about Stoke. Stoke have just got in the mayoral system. Okay. What they don't tell you is that Stoke councillors, including their elected mayor, which was all Labour, right, was arrested under corruption charges. So it's not the actual system that's the fault, it's that the people who got voted in, and by right you should vote now. In Doncaster, where we got our elected mayor in 2009, he won on the back of corruption and malpractices in Doncaster, where 21 councillors were convicted of fraud. Right? So where they say there's certain negativities about Stoke, there's reasons behind Stoke. It's not necessarily the people are naffed off with the mayoral system. What they were naffed off with was a Labour elected mayor with his hands in the pocket of somebody else getting his own cash. Right? And it's the same in Doncaster. Currently, our Doncaster mayor is campaigning against people there after another referendum to get rid of the mayor, and all it is because the Labour clique was broken up and they're not happy about it. Because the next stage he's got is actually submitted to the government to reduce the number of councillors by 1/3. And obviously 1/3 of the councillors are not happy about that. So basically they're looking after their own gravy train. That's what they're after. Salford Labour's on its own. The most recent change for directly elected mayors in Leicester. Okay, they've only just got to it. And everything Labour comes out with in Salford can be disproved by the other Labour in Leicester, where every single one of them, councillors in Leicester, every single Labour councillor voted for the mayoral system. And every single one of them said, when it was quoted that directly elected mayoral system is dearer, all of them said that they were misguided. People were misguided. It is not dearer. Again, this is not just information we've got. Anybody can look this up on the internet, and most of it is actually on Leicestershire Online, which is where I've got most of my stuff from. So all of the Labour councillors voted for an elected mayor. The council leader at the time said we want the electorate to vote on who they want rather than councillors. So it's making it more democratically accountable. The MPs at the time, Sir Peter Salford, who's actually now the Labour Mayor in Leicester, said there's real opportunities for putting money saved back into frontline services and power back to democratically elected councillors. So this was a Labour MP at the time, saying that money can be saved. You've got another MP, Keith Vaz, who says that the campaign is in keeping with Labour's policy. So it's in keeping with the national policy for directly elected mayors. So why is Salford Labour, one of the most costly Labour out of 6 neighbouring boroughs, against it? And it can purely be that they're looking after their own interests. Because the party nationally brought it in, the party nationally are in favour of it, and the most recent case where the only problem we have actually with it, with Leicester, is they never asked the people. The Labour councillors decided to go for it themselves. I've all said it's not going to cost more, it's democratically better, and the people will benefit on frontline services by the saving in costs. So Salford Labour have actually isolated themselves for the entire Labour group nationally. So it's not just an English Democrat thing, it's not a Community Action Party thing. Right? Nationally, Salford Labour are isolated. And if you've noticed in the papers, they've not come back to any response that we've been putting out, apart from the last 2 weeks, because we've left it for 2 weeks to see if we've got a response from the No campaign, and there's been nothing coming. And the reason for that is everything we've been putting in the paper, right, is actual facts, and they can't get away from actual facts. Okay. The English Democrats have been for, we've been campaigning this in virtually every council we go for, to bring it back to the people. You get the chance to vote. On the ballot paper, one of your candidates will be there. Okay? You get to pick Joe Bloggs or whoever. You want them, great. If they don't provide or do the promises they've said, you can vote them out. But with Councillor Mary's situation, which is actually called the strong leader model, and as I pointed out to Michael today, the only country that has a strong leader model was North Korea, which might give you some idea. You can't vote him out. No matter what happens, you can't vote him out. Councillor Mary, prime directive is to keep the majority of his little Labour councillors sweet. That's his priority, because they're the ones who put him in power. Right? But again, that's, I know we're going on about Labour, but that's the same with most. You could say that with councils that are Conservative run or Lib Dem run, although there's not many of them left, or whatever. That's the same, but because it's Labour, we're using Labour as an example. So no matter what Councillor Mary does, you can't get rid of it. Right? As long as he keeps his Labour councillors sweet, that vote for him in a closed room. And like Jeffrey said about the costing, Chapel Street area is costing millions of pounds. Now, who in their right mind would start a project with taxpayers' money costing millions of pounds and you haven't even got all the land in the back? Right? You just wouldn't do it. That means the people, yes, they may get a compulsory purchase order on it, it has to go to government, but they now, basically, they've got the council by the scruff. They say, well, your project's not going ahead unless we get a decent price on it. But the council aren't buying it. Why? Because it's taxpayers' money. It should have been, if they were doing a project, it has to be in the back. And one of the things Jeffrey was alluding to before about the regeneration money, ironically, Swinton went under Salford on April the 1st. That might give you something as to what's been occurring for the last 27 years. And every bit of money has been going down to Salford. Been going down to Salford. I wish I brought a paper for this one, but there was a socialist paper called the Morning Star, and they've hit on it. They've actually shown a thing, and this was up to 2 years ago. The amount of money that was going into Salford. Okay, and they said the regeneration of Salford has not been lacking money. It's not. There's millions of pounds been going into it. What they've been lacking is management of that money. Proper management. And that's why you see Salford Quays going down there, Chapel Street. And part of our policy for elected mayor is to make sure that the budget for regeneration, whether it's down to £1 million, is spent equally across the area. So if Swinton North, Swinton South, Little Hulton, right, will be looked at in the same way as the centre of Salford. You wouldn't have millions going to the centre of Salford, neglecting Swinton. Right? But also not neglecting now that Earlham, Cadishead, and all the other areas, they will be looked at equally. And that's one of the things that's been missing. When they talk about Salford, they're always talking about inner Salford. And one of the things we've noticed on them recently with the Safe Swinton, they've totally ignored Swinton to do with the Salford parliamentary seat, which is wrong, because the council is supposed to represent everybody. With a directly elected mayor, it's going on slightly a bit to the parliamentary system. And the parliamentary system, at the minute, you have 3 MPs. You've got Barbara Keeley, Hazel Blaise and Graham Stringer, looking after various areas of Salford. Kersal and Broughton comes under Manchester Stringer. Obviously, then you've got Hazel and Barbara Keeley. It doesn't matter what the boundaries are for a parliamentary with a directly elected mayor. A directly elected mayor is there, everything within the city of Salford. Right? So, if Kersal and Broughton are wondering what's going on with their area, do they see their MP? There's a Manchester MP. Right? No, they know they've got a directly elected mayor, they can speak to the directly elected mayor. Right? So it doesn't matter where you live, within the boundaries of the city of Salford, that's the person you speak to. If he doesn't deliver, you vote it out. So there's quite a big history of bringing it back to the people, but it's making it accountable, and obviously the finances, as Jeffrey's pointed out, the finances are there. As from an English Democrats point of view, we're one of our main tasks is to cut the number of councillors as well. We don't believe that you need 60 councillors. And an example we use, which we just put in the paper recently, St. Peter, now, in the US.
In Petersburg.
Pittsburgh, yeah. Pittsburgh has a population larger than Salford. It has an area larger than Salford. Right? It takes 9 councillors to run it. And you have a directly elected mayor. Right? So why are taxpayers paying out for 60 councillors on their expenses? That's without then having their special portfolios for children's services, which have been slated day in, day out with Salford. Right? You've got a chief executive on £200,000 a year who admitted breaking the law over our petition because you didn't call it in time. And Salford Council never brought it to task. So if you've got a chief executive for £200,000 a year and they admit to breaking the law, why didn't the council do anything about it? Because it's all closed. It's all enclosed, and that's what they're after only looking after themselves. But as far as the taxpayer is concerned, our candidate will reduce council tax by half. First budget he considered would have been 2013, and make it more accountable. And with the recent riots that we've just seen, one of the things, I've actually spoke to our Mayor of Doncaster to say, what could a directly elected mayor have done differently to a council leader? Well, in practice, possibly nothing more than the council leader could do. He says, but what you found with directly elected mayors was they were actually out and about in the city. Ours in Doncaster actually went out and about with the police, and all he said to the papers and in the press was, whatever the police need, they've got to stop anything happening in Doncaster. If they need antisocial behaviour, dispersal orders, they've got it. So it's this reassurance that the leader of the council, in this case directly the mayor, said to the police, you've got the powers to deal with it. And it's that reassurance to people. There was a big missing. Our council leader was still hiding somewhere in council offices. You know, yes, there's certain ones like Boris Johnson came out a bit late. He got slated for that, but most of the others, from what I've been told, did actually come out. And if you look at the one who's the so-called monkey of Hartlepool, and you speak to council workers up there, he actually goes and speaks to them directly. He doesn't ask for the manager's views on somebody else's views. he actually goes and speaks to them. That's probably one of the reasons he's been voted 3 times. You know, because they listen, because they know the next time it comes to a vote, that after your vote, not his council mates. So that's my bit.
Thank you, Stephen. In essence, in January, you're going to be given, each person in the city of Salford is going to be given a ballot paper, and in that ballot paper you'll be asked to either vote yes or no for a directly elected mayor. The people sat at this table, including myself, are in favour of a directly elected mayor for some of the reasons that have already been given. And we are encouraging people to vote yes. And that will be the first step towards a candidate who will come forward following a yes vote and put his or her name forward to confirm that if they are elected on the first budget that an elected mayor will set for 2013, there will be a 50% cut in council tax for each and every citizen in the city of Salford. Briefly, it will be funded by cuts in the regeneration budget. So the Chapel Street fiasco and the regeneration of Inner Salford, we believe, would actually be regenerated over a period of time, but funded by the private sector. And the money saved by not spending this extortionate amount of money in Inner Salford would be given back to the people of this city through a cut in their council tax. And there will be modest cuts of around 7% in other departments, which excludes education and housing.
And we just point out that this is also it's a protecting essential frontline services.
Yeah.
So the cuts certain areas will not be affected, those frontline services, because that's one thing that we've been consistent on.
Yeah.
It's also fair to say that the main frontline services for most people, or the majority of all they get from the council, is their bins empty. They don't cost very much money. The library service, I looked at that in traffic, that's £2.5 million. It's compared to a £600 million or to £400 million net budget if you take out the school's budget and certain other things. It's very small proportions for what actually gets through to most people in services they see.
So under the structure, the mayoral structure, I'll just say just a few more minutes of your time if you don't mind. So we've come together as a mayoral alliance, and the mayoral alliance in due course, in the event of a yes vote, will put forward a candidate who has the support of the mayoral alliance, and that candidate will campaign on a council tax cut of 50%. Obviously, when you have an elected mayor, in the event that people vote yes, in the event that the candidate that promises a council tax cut of 50% is elected, then the structure is that there is a cabinet system similar to the UK government, and obviously there will be council elections, and the constitution of the council will be structured in such a way that the mayoral alliance will put candidates forward in each ward in Salford City Council area who will campaign on the same policy of a cut in council tax by 50%. So in essence, the people of Salford will, in the event that there is a yes vote, there'll probably be an election. We can't confirm because obviously they are in control. But in the event of a yes vote, more than likely there will be a mayoral election and council elections at the same time. In order to maximise and strengthen the elected mayor's position to cut council tax, despite any opposition they made to that, and scaremongering stories and so on and so forth, then the Alliance will put forward candidates in each ward throughout the city of Salford who will campaign with the candidate for a mayor to cut council tax by 50%. And that will, hopefully, what will happen is if we are successful, there will be a number of elected councillors who have been elected on that policy who can support the elected mayor in the event that that person is also elected.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any questions?
Have you got enough signatures now?
Yes, if the referendum's going to happen,
Yeah.
that's
We
it.
got that. What the council was trying to do, one of the things that the chief executive did was break the law on declaring in time. She actually sent a letter, didn't she, Jeffrey?
Yeah,
Admitting that she wasn't going to comply with the law, but she was asking for more time. What she was trying to do was say they were trying to pass the buck onto these riots and all this sort of that. Everything was taken somewhere else, but the people verifying the signatures wouldn't have been involved in anything after the riots anyway. So it was just a smokescreen.
It shows how ridiculous it is. They had a month to verify it. They had another, illegally took another 4 working days, and the number of signatures which we needed to force this referendum and the number of signatures we got is probably less than the number of people on the payroll of Salford. And they claimed they weren't capable of doing it within a month. It's just symptomatic of how badly Salford Council is run at your expense.
See, the other thing that you've got is Councillor Mary stood up in council and said they were going to write to every single one on the list. But that was at the taxpayer's expense as well.
It's not being done.
So it's not being done, which would have been completely inappropriate. But what you've got to remember is now, currently, Councillor Mary is fighting for his council leader job. And not only that, so is the chief executive, Barbara Spicer. Because her position, and this is where you could save another £200,000, is not required. And there was the latest one in Torbay that came about from, who actually said she was actually doing a project that her position as chief executive of Torbay wasn't required with the directly elected mayor. She was doing herself out of her job. So obviously you've got 2 people in council, well in Salford Council, Barbara Spicer on £200,000 a year and the council leader.
How did they become chief executive?
Well, they just appointed her, it's just a position they advertise.
How did they?
Which they're not elected.
The chief executives.
It's a job.
It's
They
a job.
apply for a job.
It's a job, they apply for the job.
And very often connections are used.
Yeah,
So they-
yeah.
they-
You know,
if-
because if I mention Barbara Spicer to anybody, they haven't a clue who she is. They really.
Unless they work for Salford Council.
They've not got a clue. Yeah.
So would your directly elected mayor replace chief executive then?
The chief executive wouldn't be required, they could possibly put them into a part-time position, but certainly won't be on £200,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
It is not required. And this is one of the things, and as Barbara Spicer's isn't an elected position, if she was an elected position, she'd be brought up, if she brought the law, she'd be brought up by the scrutiny committees and all this kind of stuff. As an employee of the council, she broke the law, admitted breaking the law, and the council did nothing. Yeah, if it was Joe Bloggs on the street, surely should have done something.
So some of us suspect it was the council mayor who put her up to delaying the validation of the petition, and it wasn't even close. They validated on. We needed 8,530 signatures. Is valid on the electoral register. They validated that there were 9,062 of the just over 10,000 we submitted. So it wasn't even close. They didn't even need a recount.
This is, I've just had this one just to show, I've just found it actually. Torbay Council, which is planning to move to a directly elected mayor system, the chief executive there has publicly discussed abolishing a £150,000 a year post. And And she said, I want to have a courageous conversation about the role of chief executive and whether you need one in authorities with elected mayors. Now that's coming from the chief executive, right? Talking about doing herself out of a job.
Is she only there just to rubber stamp everything?
No.
She's
Does she have any say?
We suspect that the people, when I went around with the petitions, who actually worked at a reasonably senior level at Salford Council. She runs the council in effect rather than Mary.
Right.
Basic work. Well, she and her and the officers beneath her. I mean, according to those who know her, she doesn't have that much clue herself, and she depends on those immediately below her. But basically, these positions are often in place men.
But she also has, about five directors of services as well that are all around £140,000 a year plus.
In Doncaster, there's 2 points I would like to make. The first one, actually, more closer to home, is the actual task of getting 10,000 signatures. I personally believe I've done quite a lot of campaigns in my time, as Albert knows, some of them, and getting 10,000 signatures, I think, is a commendable task indeed to actually trigger a referendum. People may not understand, and in fact there's been some criticism, but when you actually think about the trouble it can take to get one signature, to actually get 10,000 is a massive achievement. And for me, the City of Salford should be grateful for what Geoffrey and his team have done, because the UK government have actually in 2012 instructed 12 city councils to hold a referendum in 2012, including Manchester. So Manchester are being given a referendum in 2012 as of right, where Salford City was actually deprived that right because they felt that we were not a priority. Now obviously the government feel that that system is a good way of local government, so as far as I'm concerned, what's good for Manchester is good for Salford. That's the first point.
And in truth, all three parties are involved in this system. The original legislation was passed by Labour, enabling for elected mayors, and is supported by a Labour, although the local Labour, and they're not the only ones, and then complain about the cost. When the law is if people sign the petitions, that you have it. So it's not that it's to say you should never sign according to Mary and his friends, because it will cost some money. That wasn't supported by the original Labour legislation. And then, and as Mike says, it's been expanded by the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats in coalition to force the bigger cities, and some not much bigger than Salford. I mean, Leicester, which was one of the 12, although they're trying to avoid it by jumping the gun, has only perhaps 40 or 50% more population than Salford, to have these referendums. So,
when they talk about costs, the council talks about whatever X amount of money it is for the cost of a referendum. They should be reminded that giving the people the chance to speak democratically should have no cost to it. Right? It's for the people to speak, and as Remembrance Day is coming shortly, you should be reminded of that. The other thing we should be reminded of was directly elected mayor didn't authorise tea and biscuits at a cost of £30,000 a year. A directly elected mayor was not authorised actually losing £140,000. So where they going about the cost, the Conservative pulled up.
What they're worried about in the Labour group is that no directly elected mayor has executive support members giving them each extra money, 8 of them. I mean, that covers probably the majority of those Labour councillors who haven't squeezed an extra responsibility allowance from somewhere else anyhow.
If he's got them at 8, that's 8 votes in the bag for Merrick every time his leadership's challenged.
Can I ask a question? As I say, You said that Bob Spice on 201 grand, like a job might not be required, but John Merry, how much is 61? How much is, if you took on a new mayor, how much would the mayor be on?
Well, the mayor can set his own wage.
Yeah.
Within limits.
Within limits, but as our mayor in Doncaster proved, right, he could have been claiming nearly £80,000 a year, but he didn't. What English Democrat mayor in Doncaster did, first of all, was cut his wage down to £30,000, because he said in Doncaster he can live on £30,000.
So he took like 50 grand off his wages?
He took, yeah, basically half his wage, because he said he didn't need it. The other things he did, he got rid of the Mayoral card, because of his age. He said he uses public transport, he's got a free pass, uses public transport. He cut translation services for immigrants, because he said the Doncaster has very good English classes, which is more beneficial than a translation service to people, and they could use them English classes for 3 months, right, no charge. That was it. You then got, yes, he cut the funding to the Pride, which he got slated on, but the fact was he wasn't against the Pride, he was just against taxpayers' money, not going against frontline services. Taxpayers' money should always be for frontline services, right? And the Pride goes on. He also then, with quite a lot of savings, put extra social workers into the children's services, because at the time, just like Salford, Doncaster was being slated for child deaths in Doncaster. So, and that's one of the tickets he got elected on, because Labour in Doncaster was just as bad as Labour in Salford as far as children's services are concerned. And what he did with the savings was put social workers back into the system to find out and stop these child deaths. So the savings can be there quite clearly.
If there's another election, what's the contract to these 60 councillors we've got? Will they be moved sideways, fictitious names called? Or will they have to go?
Well, the answer to that is, unfortunately, the councillors as such, the system is determined elsewhere nationally, so a mayor couldn't get rid of it. There should be a clear demarcation between they're there to scrutinise, the mayor's there to run them. In the borough. At the moment,
submit to Westminster.
You've got a bunch of mayor, and then 60 councillors and give up his...
But what they can do is, I mean, the first thing they will go is these executive support members and those costs. That system invented by Labour, especially in Salford, will go, and some of the extra responsibility allowances will be cut. So the system, and let alone the number of officers working to service all these councillors and democratic services, that will be cut by more than 7%, I'm sure.
What's occurred in other areas here? What's occurred in other areas?
If we will reduce some of the expenses associated with it. But being able to change the system is beyond the immediate competence of an elected mayor.
Yeah, what normally happens is, and like what's happening in Doncaster or in certain other areas, is the mayor can, what he's trying to say, straight away cut how much the councillors can claim. You can cut that straight away to what they can claim. He then submits to Westminster that he wants to reduce the number of councillors by a third or whatever number. This is what's occurred in Doncaster. He submitted to Westminster. This is why a lot of them are trying to get him out, purely because they know a third of them are about to be booted out if he gets
Can't soon go without the fights.
This is it, they don't go without a fight. We're under no illusions what the council will try. We have, this is one of the things that we try to bring up any negative questions, what they might say, like Stoke, because one of the things they've said is, well, Stoke have just got rid of their mayor. Yeah, what they don't tell you was actually it was a Labour mayor and he'd been arrested for corruption along with a lot of his other staff. And they said, well, in Doncaster, we're trying to get rid of the mayor there. Yes, but what they don't tell you is it's because he's about to chop a third of them and they're fighting for the positions. So these arguments, this is one of the reasons why they've not been hitting the papers, is because their arguments are that weak that you can throw Labour examples against Labour. Because this Salford Labour, as I was pointing out on the precinct, they're isolated. Not only are they isolated in the cost that we're paying to the taxpayer, it's the most costly one in the area, the 6 neighbouring ones, they're isolated nationally. Labour nationally are in favour of elected mayors. Nationally, other councils are switching to it. And so, yeah, they won't go down without a fight. But this is one of the things that we have to do. First of all, we have to get the directly elected mayor in.
I would for a fact.
That's why once he's in,
Once he's in, then
That
he can say that we will put a candidate up that will halve the council tax. We've got it all costed. Jeffrey's department's been costed. And one of the criteria from our side is frontline services to be protected. Because at the end of the day, that's what taxpayers pay for, is them frontline services. Why would I vote for elected mayor if I'm going to have more services cut than what I wouldn't? So you've got to pay for protect them services. Yes, they're not going to go down without a fight, especially council mayor, but going off the media response, we've been quite positive on it. We've been trying to speak to other parties who are normally in favour, and some are not in favour of Salford having one, but they're in favour of Greater Manchester having one.
Well, the Conservative Party in Salford, led by Councillor Karen Garrigo, they are definitely in favour to Labour's dismay. So there is a real opportunity for a yes vote in the city of Salford, I believe. In Bury, all the main parties were against. In the city of Salford, the Conservatives have actually come out in favour of a directly elected mayor. So in areas like Worsley, the west of Salford and Swinton, where there is a considerable Conservative vote, and I believe the message does get out through different channels, and so the battle for a yes vote, I believe, is there to be won in Salford. For that reason.
Just highlight one of the things to do with Bury, because that's one of the things. Because obviously I live in Bury now, we live in Swinton. My auntie will know that very far. And Jeff is from Prestwich. We got Bury into a mayoral referendum vote in 2008. But the circumstances for that was different. Okay. When they say Bury rejects the mayoral system, going for a mayoral system in Bury was part of the anti-congestion charge movement, which me and Jeff was involved with. The idea of all this cost savings and being democratically electable wasn't even mentioned at the time.
Well, slightly mentioned.
Yeah, it was a side thing. Our main priority on the Bury mayoral referendum was to keep the anti-congestion charge movement in people's minds. And as we found out when we actually got the referendum, because Bolton eventually curtailed and said they would have one no matter what. Greater Manchester then had one, and we won 10 councils to 0.
Yes, this was the idea of the Bury referendum. We offered Bury and we offered Bolton because we came close to forcing one in Bolton. And the option of having a referendum on the congestion charge, we wouldn't push for a mayoral referendum in their borough. This was actually before the strong leader came in, and the system was less dictatorial than now on the way the councils were run. And Bury turned down our generous offer, but Bolton, when they saw what happened in Bury, then accepted it. It for various reasons, partly Bolton chose.
In Bury, we actually lost that particular battle, but we won the war, so to speak, on the anti-congestion charge.
Forcing the referendum.
By forcing the referendum.
People power.
Any more questions?
Well, the other question I've got now is, as regards this meeting, should it have been advertised a little bit earlier? I didn't know till I met you today. Is it in here?
Yeah, the
was sent to papers, wasn't it?
Yeah, the problem that we do have, to be honest with you, Albert, is manpower, and that's what we're lacking really. We're lacking the physical resources. I've delivered around Swinton 5,000 leaflets But I've stuck
Of
to...
course, regards this meeting, Nick.
Yeah, on a range of issues, on a range of issues. I first started delivering that particular leaflet about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, I think
Did it have a today's date on it?
The other issue we have
Tonight's
is...
meeting on it, the leaflets. Did it have tonight's meeting on the leaflets?
Yes, it did.
It did.
Yes. Yes.
On his own one, besides everyone.
But I'm not concerned about it, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because we're competing against 2 football matches tonight, and I know which one I would pick if it was given the opportunity.
Does your hat give you away?
Pardon?
Does your hat?
I'm a Preston North End fan. And
Which team you would...
no, I'm City well. No, I've had a few comments about it from City fans. Yeah. And the other thing is the support that we've had today. You know, without blowing our own trumpet, quite a few people actually came.
There was a big difference in Swinton today that we noticed. It's one thing shoving a leaflet in somebody's hand, move the night down, put it in the bag, wait till you get home, but shove it in the bin. Or they might shove it in the bin. Normally when you lay up leaflets in, you check the bins like that's closest to you in case you don't put them in. But when we got on the megaphone, that showed that there was an awful lot of people coming up asking us about it. And I think that was the big difference, weren't it? That people coming, asking and taking leaflets off us.
Yeah, because we found a lot of people in Swinton and Anglebury, the way it's just been totally and utterly
But we were getting into
disgraceful.
more onto the Save Swinton side at one point, weren't we?
Yeah.
About all the money, all the Swinton taxpayers' money being sent into other areas of Salford and not being spent here.
There's no money been spent for years.
On either parts near the precinct or whatever area, it's just been sent into in Salford. And as the Morning Star pointed out, it's not for the lack of money, this regeneration, but it's the lack of proper management.
I meant to bring it tonight, Michael. Did you see the leaflet that's... I haven't put...
Yeah, the glossy one. It's a big red glossy one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I'll be honest with you, that's the first time I've seen Antrobus have his photograph taken in Swinton.
Yeah.
And I feel like putting a letter in the advertiser saying, you know,
There is a...
did somebody have to draw you a map to the windmill? Because I'm sure he's never been there before.
No, it's the same one. It's the same one that I've seen. And to couple that with your question, Albert, the Labour Party have been putting out a leaflet in Swinton North, and the leaflet that they've put out in the area that I'm campaigning, I put 5,000 leaflets out, and I've done it myself, and I've actually delivered 25,000 because I've been round, well, a bit less than that, I've not gone everywhere every time, but I've delivered a good 20,000 myself since May.
One of the things part of this alliance as well is the English Democrats and the Community Action Party have agreed not to stand in the same wars. Now, as an example, for me, Michael's actually standing in a war that I grew up in when my mum's at, but we've agreed not to stand there. Right? So, Community Action Party have said, got to set them wards, we've got our wards, and we won't be, because if you've got 2 people standing on the same ticket, we're going to split the vote. Yeah. It's pointless splitting the vote. So this is one of the things that we're working to. We're hoping some others will actually join us on that as well. But some other parties seem to have their own vested interests rather than...
They agree with the policy, but they won't agree to cooperate.
That said, our greatest need in this campaign, and it's sort of wide, not just Swinton North or even in Swinton, is to get volunteers who do deliver leaflets for us in the various parts of the borough to spread the message everywhere that it's more democratic to have a directly elected mayor, and that opens the possibilities is to have a massive cut in council tax and a fairer distribution of what money is spent according to the various areas. So if any of you, apart from those already involved, if you'd be willing to help us leaflet it would be much appreciated, because it's a campaign which not only has English Democrats and Community Action Party, it has independents like myself who aren't in any party. You don't have to affiliate your party, you just agree with us, come and help us.
Obviously, I see mine quite a lot. So if you get any leaflets, you give them Mayoral, distribute around my area. You've given me before,
I have Albert.
and I've always asked them
Yeah,
that.
of course.
Plus word about it as well.
Yeah.
And still do a few more for us, for the special campaign.
Yeah.
I can't, I'll see if I can get full notes.
Yeah. But Albert's fairly well known Swintonian, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, you know, spread the word and
We'll give you some leaflets.
yeah.
Well, I'm just following the other thing. One of the other things that I need to get some of the minute on is that obviously that Michael's from Preston, but it doesn't really matter because what he's bothered about is his area he lives in. Right? I live in Bury now, so I'm obviously bothered about Bury as well as my hometown.
Yeah.
So Michael's just as passionate about Swinton as most of us live in. That's why he was brought up here.
I'm probably more passionate about Swinton than the hometown, if the truth be known now.
How long have you been here now?
7 years. I live on Wyndham Avenue and Albert knows.
Well, I can also appreciate what we're getting for the allotments. You worked very, very hard on that when they first started, so
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah. I
You
actually
worked very hard on it.
well, I formed the Swinton District Allotments and Leisure
Did very
Gardens
well,
Association, regenerated.
I just thought something actually, and if anybody points it out, just remind him that Barbara Keeley, the Labour MP for Worsley, actually lives in Sale. Yes. This is what I mean, you can always use Labour quotes against themselves.
Yeah.
You know? So it's, yeah, Barbara Keeley lives in Sale.
Okay, any more questions?
No, now can I go now?
Yes, sure.
Yeah,
You'll be in contact everybody.
Will do.
We'll lock the door.
Give me a bit of early Chelsea's time. I'll take somebody with me.
Yeah, will do.
Anyway, thanks everyone.
See you.
See you, mate.
Yes. I actually do think that, and I can give you an example, where the parliamentary boundaries being reorganised, they were setting up a Swinton constituency. Now obviously, my own experience tells me is that whilst an MP's power is, you know, it's limited when you've got 600 people, but having an MP in Parliament representing your town does make a difference. And why I know that is because Hazel Blease is herself shouting up for Salford, but in reality when she's shouting up for Salford, she's actually shouting up for inner Salford and old Salford and all the regeneration money that's all going down that way. So the Salford Advertiser, in terms of the media, they're very Salford orientated, and I think there's a deliberate policy to downplay this referendum a little bit, to try and, well, I don't know, make people not even think about it.
Because you see,
not mentioned.
you see the thing that Hazel Blaze is
We'll have a few
piping on about,
letters.
she's piping on about all this money and everything. What they're forgetting is Swinton will have a constituency MP. So all the benefits that Hazel Blaze is piping on about will come to Swinton.
Would come to Swinton. Would come to Swinton.
One of them's got to go on about Keeley or...
Yeah.
Go
Well,
elsewhere.
if the proposals stay as they've recommended, but what happened were the Salford Advertiser set up a campaign, Save Salford, and even me not being born and bred in Swinton, but has took the trouble to listen to Swintonians over a period of time, through my own experiences, if you actually listen to people, then you get a gauge of how people feel. And I knew straight away that the advertiser here needed to be very, very careful, because whilst they were promoting Salford, they were doing it at Swinton's detriment, because I made valid arguments that what's good for Salford is good for Swinton. And so I wrote to them and sent them a very strong letter, didn't I? And the following week, they sent a reporter to Swinton Precinct, and in that week's advertiser, there were several people arguing up for a Swinton constituency. So their arguments were becoming more balanced, and that was as a result of a very strong letter I sent to them. You know,
We actually got land off the Save Salford side.
yeah, and Fred as well.
Because they couldn't win the argument without Save Swinton, about the benefits to Swinton. They were saying all the benefits to Salford, and we said, well, what about the benefits to Swinton?
You see, we're talking about a small part.
It's a very small part.
Everybody else is just
Yeah.
going out of it.
And they were going on about...
It's the flagship.
Yeah, they were going on about Salford's identity. But we said, well, hang on, you've got Salford University, but suddenly saying Salford Manchester. Right, you look on the Salford Keys website for Media City, it actually says Media City on Manchester's historic waterfront. It doesn't mention Salford. Right? And yet, this is where millions of Swinton taxpayers' money has been pumped. And yet, they're saying it's Manchester. You know. As a council, if the council's putting any kind of money
Swinton off
that
the
way,
map, I think they've been quite active about that.
well,
They
just
they are very happy about wiping Swinton off the map. You know, even, you know, their argument, well, Swinton's in the city of Salford, the constituency that Hazel Lees represents is actually called Salford and Eccles. Well, I always thought that Eccles was in the city of Salford. So their arguments are just
Never
completely
mentions Eccles,
illustrative.
do they?
Apart from which there's
Never
one
mention
ward in
Eccles.
Eccles you represent, the three.
Yeah, well, they came up with another thing which they didn't particularly like, was on Littleton Road, the Salford Sports Centre, which has just got rave reviews. And somebody put on, this is what an example of good sports facilities in Salford, until it was pointed out that actually Curzon Broughton, and Curzon where the sports centre is, actually has a Manchester MP. So we said we're really pleased that you're highlighting such a benefit to a Salford community. Hopefully their Manchester MP will pick up on it. Because they were trying to say only a Salford MP can bring all these benefits, but the argument was lost.
So on a political level, you know, we've had a massive turnout this evening. We've got some very good pictures that can be publicised about the meeting and how successful it's been. We've campaigned up to the meeting, which I think is really important. Holding the meeting is important, but the actual work in leading up to that has meant we delivered 5,000 leaflets.
It's not always quantity, it's quality.
Of course. And actually, a few people said that today. They actually stopped.
Yeah, they actually said
And
keep it
said,
going.
keep it going. The leaflets you're putting round
It's
are quality information, you know, and we even got, we had to stand around the bus stop, didn't we? Because we weren't allowed anywhere else. And there were actually people coming to us, taking leaflets and saying, well done.
And that's
Well
how
done,
you
yeah.
engage it.
And that's how we're gauged that the message is getting out there. So I'm not worried about this at all this evening.
amazing, that is very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.